I don't know, maybe they'd be surprised to see me drinking beer on a legal podcast. Who knows? You have people who are just such incredible legal minds, and then you have people who are really much more about get it done quickly.
Was it a traffic ticket? What was he appealing?
I think it may have been a resisting arrest conviction because he was pulled over for having no license plates on his car, and when the police pulled him over, he got out and started fighting them. And not legal advice, but you really shouldn't do that.
Welcome back to Boston Barristers, a podcast where we dive deep into the world of law, share stories, and have a little fun along the way. You've already heard from Bill and me, but today we're introducing Chris O'Brien, the newest addition to our team. Chris, welcome to the show. We're excited to get to know you better.
Thanks much. I'm excited to be here, Matthew.
So let's start with something personal to get to know you better, Chris. So where are you originally from?
Originally from Swampscott, Massachusetts. Born and raised.
All right.
I moved back here, actually, after, 10 or 15 years. Moved back to raise my kids closer to my folks and the rest of my family.
So where did you go to school?
So originally Fairfield University and then New England School of Law in Boston. And then I essentially just moved around different parts of exurban Boston until, again, I spent a couple of years in Salem, Mass, and then moved back to Swampscott.
What about high school, middle school, elementary school, all that kind of stuff?
So I believe now officially defunct Hadley Elementary School in Swampscott, and then Swampscott Middle School, also defunct and torn down, and St. John's Preparatory in Danvers is where I went to high school.
St. John's Prep, huh?
They call it the Prep. It was a good school. I got a good education there. You know, it's an unusual thing because there's a dress code and it's like a 30-something minute drive from my house, and it's an all-boys school, parochial Xaverian education. So a lot of religious ed classes, and it was, like I said, a mixed bag at times, but I think I got a really good education there. So here we are.
Yeah. I went to a former military school in Alabama. We weren't military when I went there, but we had a dress code too, like coat and tie and all that stuff for assemblies every once in a while. Did you guys have to do that?
We had to do assemblies, and I think that's when you had to wear a tie, but generally it was like, slacks and a button up. And, here I am in slacks and a button up and a sports coat. So, right at home, I guess. Although I will probably try to make this slightly more informal by enjoying a beer while we cut this podcast. You can't see me right now, but I am drinking from my beer.
Ha, nice. So how did you first get into law?
So, my father was a litigation attorney for, I think, around 30 years. He did plaintiff's injury, personal injury plaintiff's work. And my uncle was a law school dean. I had a cousin who went to law school. So there were a lot of lawyers in my family already. And it seemed like something I was gravitating towards as I was getting through school. And it just made sense for me when I got out of college to head into law school. And from there, I was a tax attorney. I graduated in 2011, so there was a bit of a mess with the employment sector for lawyers, especially in Boston. There's sort of a lot of people looking for work, and I had an offer from a tax firm, so I did that. Corporate transaction taxes, which I won't go into too much detail unless you want to hear about sales and use, multi-jurisdictional sales and use taxes. And I did that for longer than I expected to. And after a while, I just needed a change, so I became a prosecutor. And I went up to Rockingham County, New Hampshire, where I worked for the Rockingham County attorney as an assistant county attorney. I basically was a line prosecutor doing all kinds of cases. Because of my background in tax, they had me do whatever white collar stuff walked in the door, which wasn't really very much in that area, particularly rural. So you didn't get a lot of the sort of nexus. So, you'd see a lot of stuff later in my career would get sort of located in Boston for white collar stuff. But up in Rockingham County, there were a lot of highways and there was a lot of drug trafficking through Massachusetts up to Maine or parts of New Hampshire. And so I ended up doing a lot of narcotics work while I was at the Rockingham County Attorney's Office.
What's something people would be surprised to learn about you? You seem kind of like a button-up guy, but what's something that something outside the legal world that people might be interested to know about you?
I don't know. Maybe they'd be surprised to see me drinking beer on a legal podcast. Who knows? Before I had kids, I made my own beer. And I started doing that when I was in law school, frankly. So yeah, I suppose besides that, I love to get outside, despite it looking like I'm in a Phantom of the Opera style cave in here filming this podcast. I love to go hiking. I was hiking a couple of weeks ago in something like 6 feet of snow, for which I was modestly prepared. I just still, despite how treacherous it was, I really enjoyed it because it's just nice to get out and, especially up in the Whites in New Hampshire in the White Mountains. So yeah, I suppose those are some of the things I like to do when I have any free time with two young children.
Oh, yeah. It's gorgeous up there in the White Mountains. So when you're not in the courtroom, what do you love doing? What other hobbies do you have? I mean, you said you have kids. I mean, I know this. You have 2 kids. Tell us about them. What do they enjoy doing?
4.5 and 2.5, a boy and a girl. And they are, I think people who work with me would tell you that I talk about my kids too much. And I don't agree. I talk about them the exact right amount. I love, showing people pictures of my kids. I mean, that's something about me. It's kind of obnoxious, among other things, is that I like to talk about my kids. It really is like every waking hour of my life that I'm not working, I'm spending, with them or shooting podcasts. Or hiking, I guess. But yeah, so it's been a real interesting experience raising them while trying to be a trial attorney. It's just, the demands of both are a lot, but it's, you have to love what you're doing professionally, and I do, which helps. And obviously I love spending time with Teddy and Charlotte. So,
oh yeah.
Yeah.
So what's your favorite spot in Boston, do you think? Like any hidden gems or local hangouts you like?
So I would have to go back for this to a time before time. When I was in law school, the Harpoon Brewery out in the Seaport, this is before the Seaport got developed. You had to take the Silver Line train to get out there. And it was like, if you made the hike, it was totally worth it, because they would just sort of open up their tap to you for like 30 minutes after giving you a like perfunctory tour of the brewery. And that was a really special place. So, I mean, unfortunately, that's like a place geographically and also out of time, because it has since developed and the Seaport has exploded into like the financial district, on steroids. So, that will always have a special place in my heart. That and the TAM, which I do believe is still there. Spent a lot of time in the TAM during law school, studying mostly. But yeah, so those are to see if I can come up with one that's not a drinking establishment. I mean, I love walking around the Common and the Public Garden. I did that a lot when I was in law school and I needed to unwind. I mean, it's really amazing to have such a great green space in the middle of the city.
Yeah, in the Seaport, I interned there during law school, and it was like the federal courthouse and a bunch of parking lots. And it makes me feel so old to tell people that, back in my day, there was nothing around here.
This was all vaguely threatening industrial parks when I was in school.
And it's amazing how much it's grown up. I mean, like, I think Rob Gronkowski had his apartment there. I mean, it's really wild. So, yeah, let's talk a little bit about your professional background. You went into this before. So you were a prosecutor you said Rockingham County, and then you went to Salem, New Hampshire as a prosecutor. How was practicing up north?
Practicing up north was interesting, especially, when you don't have anything to compare it to. But now that I do, I would say it was a great place to get started. It's a little bit different in that the superior courts are where you get your start. And so I think, prepping superior court jury trials in my first 6 to 10 months, and then after a while, when I started doing the narcotics work and I could try cases on my own, they'd have then it's more like a line position in a district attorney's office in Massachusetts, because, it'd schedule me for 4 trials a week and you would try whichever ones you could. You had to prepare for all of them. And I got into the narcotics work really mostly because it was simple and I could do a lot of it. And I wanted to get into court. And I wanted to try cases. So you could take these really complex cases, but you might see one of them at trial every 4 to 6 months. Whereas the narcotic stuff, you could be at trial 4 or 5 times a month. And so I got a lot out of that. And I was very busy. I will say that, generally, I really liked the judges that I appeared in front of. They were great, and they were curious about the law, and some of them were extremely knowledgeable. And the ones who weren't seemed to have a genuine interest in what the law was supposed to tell them to do. And, I wouldn't say that's not true in Massachusetts. I am just surprised. I think because there are so many more judges I've appeared in front of since I came down here, that the breadth of the types of people you meet, right? You have people who are just such incredible legal minds, and then you have people who are really much more about get it done quickly. It's more about efficiency than sitting there, thinking about the different ways that the law might apply in a particular case. It was harsher, I think, is fair to say. And I know that, that may be tempered to some degree now, because it's been 4 years since I was really up there, but people did serious time for stuff that down here you'd get a quaff, you'd walk away from it. The treatment of white collar crime down here, I know we're probably going to talk about that a little bit more. The treatment of white collar crime in Massachusetts is a lot less severe, I think, than it was in New Hampshire. The time I spent in the Salem PD was brief, mostly just because the next opportunity that came up was one that I had to take. But I really liked the people I worked with, and district court work up there was like remarkably more frenetic than I would just go to court with. I think that's really what deep in the weeds district attorneys deal with in Mass, where I'm carrying 50 case files in 2 bankers' boxes to court every morning. And it's like an athletic event, because you just go through, you're standing up in court for 7.5 hours. And by the time you're done, you just want to go lie down. So the opportunity came up after a little short time there to join the Massachusetts Attorney General's office. And since I was still living in Massachusetts and it would be a short train ride instead of an hour-plus drive to New Hampshire, it was an opportunity I couldn't pass up.
Yeah. So at the AG's office, what kind of cases did you handle?
So when I joined the AG's office, I joined as an assistant attorney general in the Insurance and Unemployment Fraud Division, which is nested in the Criminal Bureau. And I did what it sounds like, insurance and unemployment fraud. One thing I think I really loved about that job was that I was able to get cross-designated to a lot of different types of white-collar crime. One of the largest cases I worked on during my time there was the money laundering end of a large, a 10-person conspiracy to bring not controlled substances, but narcotizing substances into a prison. And obviously, any enterprise, it's going to have a banking component, and they needed someone who knew how to do that kind of work. So they brought me in. I got a lot out of that. It was really quite an experience. So, like I said, white collar work generally, but with some cross-designation. If you're facing legal trouble in Massachusetts, whether it's an OUI, firearms charges, or even just a clerk magistrate's hearing, the stakes are high. This is not the time to go it alone. You need a lawyer. But more than that, you need a legal team that knows how to fight and knows how to win. That's why people across Massachusetts are turning to the law offices of Matthew W. Peterson. With over a dozen years of experience in criminal law, both on the defense and prosecution side, we've got the track record and the passion to defend your rights. If you've lost your firearms license, or you're dealing with family law or immigration issues, we've successfully helped clients and represented them in some of the most difficult situations out there. From first-time offenses to serious felony charges, we've helped people protect their record, protect their families, and protect their freedom. So don't wait until it's too late. Visit mwpetersonlaw.com to schedule a consultation or call 617-295-7500. That's mwpetersonlaw.com, 617-295-7500. Because when your future's on the line, you deserve a legal team that's all in. Stay informed, stay legal.
So what's the most important lesson you've learned in your years as a prosecutor that you bring to your criminal defense clients today?
You need to know how complicated this stuff can get. I think a lot of time you go to court, everything happens really quickly, and it seems like, it's nothing really important happened, or rather nothing complicated happened. But what's going on behind the scenes is extremely complicated. And if you don't have a lot of experience dealing with it, this is one of the crazy things I think that a lot of lawyers would be able to sort of familiarize with, which is when someone finds out you're a lawyer, they're like, I have a legal question. And you're like, I probably can't help you, because unless it's about the very specific types of law I've practiced, I don't know what to tell you. Within criminal law, right? I mean, you've probably had that. They're like, hey, I have a problem with my real estate. And you're like, I could probably figure it out, but off the top of dome, I have no clue.
Yeah, and it's like I hire other people to be my real estate
Right.
lawyer. So why would I give you advice?
I don't do my own personal income taxes. I was a tax attorney, and but I only did one kind of tax, and just the amount of knowledge, the amount of law that's out there, it's like the specialization becomes really kind of mind numbing, and I think that's even true in the tiny subgenre that is criminal law, right?
Oh, yeah.
I think and you point out like there's a lot you can learn from being on the prosecution side, and then there's a lot you can learn from being on the defense side. Being in prosecution, different types of cases have different levels of complexity, and being able to like know what goes into it. This is my long way around of answering your question. Being that I put cases together, especially like complex cases, white collar litigation, like I know what has to get done to bring charges. And if it doesn't get done, now I know where the holes are. I mean, I know what the hardest parts were for all the cases I had to put together. And so if somebody gets charged with it, I automatically know where to go to start looking to see, like, did they patch up the identity issue if this is a question of a crime you're trying to prove with bank records? Like,
Right.
just stuff that I've had to wrestle with repeatedly and spent like months trying to get answers to from an investigative perspective. Now, as a defense attorney, I can tell you, like, they're going to have a problem with blank or blank. If they didn't do X, Y, and Z, this case is going to fall apart the minute I lean on it. So...
Yeah, exactly. So it's like either know your enemy or, whatever you want to say. If you know how to build it, you know how to destroy it. I mean, I think it's the same principle.
Yeah, for sure.
So you've probably seen some pretty intense moments in the courtroom as a prosecutor over the years. What's the most dramatic thing that you remember?
Honestly, the one that stands out the most is probably early in my career, the first couple of weeks. I had a gentleman who was part of the sovereign citizen movement, and that may mean more to folks who have been in the law. But there is a political movement or ideological movement that focused a lot in New Hampshire in the 90s. There are a number of people who would identify that way, I think, who were in the New Hampshire legislature. And it's sort of, again, a political ideology that, like, probably going to do it injustice here, but generally, until I, like, agree to be beholden to your laws, I should be exempt from your laws. You could see why that might be appealing to people who are already incarcerated, people who are looking for a way to try and like dupe the justice system into letting them go. And so I had a gentleman who, he was there, and the minute he stands up, he tells the judge can't call him by his name because that's not a name he's accepted. It's a name he was given. And the judge is like, okay. And he says, second of all, your flag has tassels, which means that it's a maritime court. And since I was pulled over for driving, you can't tell me anything. And you have no jurisdiction here. And the judge was like, okay, this is going to be a long hearing. But he was wrong. It was actually a very short hearing because the man stood up. He got agitated and he stood up. And he started like yelling about jurisdiction. Which was the first time I'd seen that happen. And then the court security started to kind of like surround him because they were worried he was going to charge the bench. And he sees them and he says, I feel threatened. And then he turns to start like confronting one of the CSOs, at which point they all essentially tackled him and had to drag him bodily from the court. And so you gotta understand too, if you've not been inside a courtroom, like I'm at counsel table and this is happening like 3.5 feet away from me. And I had a supervisor with me and I was like, what are we supposed to do in this situation? He said, don't move. Like, just stay where you are. And I was like, does this happen all the time? He said, this has never happened to me before. I was like, okay. So, I don't know what ended up happening with that guy's case because I think, he was there for an appeal, if you can believe it. And the judge, I think, after he had fled the courtroom, because of the altercation, he came back in and said, I am deeming the appeal to have been waived. And so I think at that point...
Wait, was it a traffic ticket? What was he appealing?
I think it may have been a resisting arrest conviction because he was pulled over for having no license plates on his car. And when the police pulled him over, he got out and started fighting them. And you just... Not legal advice, but you really shouldn't do that. I mean, as much as you may want to, you really shouldn't. And... I still remember that guy's name. I'm not going to say it, but I still remember his name. And that would have been 2018. And I only had that one instance. But like that things can go south that quickly was really, really something to see. And it gives a sense of the gravity of, of legal proceedings, right? That like, this is this guy's freedom. Like he's invested.
So what made you shift from being a prosecutor to coming to join us on the good guys in the criminal defense?
Well, I just got tired of hearing how I was not one of the good guys, and I figured it was time to make a change. No,
It's not too late, It's never too late for you,
the message
you
to all
prosecutors out there.
It's not too late. Into the warm embrace of the defense bar.
Right, exactly.
So what it was is I had been a prosecutor for 7 years, which there are people who do it for their career, and my hat's off to those people because it is a very hard job to do for as long as I did it. And I knew people who did it for like 20 years. 7 years is practically a lifetime. You get jokes that in the district attorney's offices around here, if you're there for 2 years, you're a supervisor, right? So 7 years, I was a managing attorney at the attorney general's office in my division. It was a long career with a lot of very challenging work, which I really enjoyed. But at a certain point, it's public service. I had 2 children, and then, it's one of the things that I think is a sad reality is that it's hard to earn a living, with how the economy is these days, and the cost of living is getting so high that I needed to make a change in that way. Also, I met the right people, the right firm came along. I do think that this is to the people in the podcast. Matthew and I met while I was an assistant attorney general and he was a defense attorney. We had a particularly challenging case together. And because we both had kids of approximately the same age, we both lived in Swampscott, we ended up kind of becoming friendly after that case wrapped. It was nice to see that someone in the defense bar had, the same kind of concerns that I did, about the ethics of what we do, because a lot of my interactions up to that point with defense attorneys, and don't get me wrong, I'd met defense attorneys who I thought were great, who I really liked. There were some I couldn't get along with, but by and large, there was a certain hard-headedness about, the approach to defending people that didn't make a lot of sense to me, given the reality of what I had seen as a prosecutor. So discussing it with you a lot, and hearing about how you wrestled with certain aspects of the practice, but how a lot of it was really rewarding, that made a big difference to me. And I think, getting a sense that you were coming at it from the same, I want to be a professional who does a professional job and I want to do it well, that mattered. Plus, you tried 15 cases last year, and I've tried 1 case in the last 5 years. So I really needed to I was so hungry to get back into court, and this is sort of a different tangent, but when you do this white collar work, stuff does not go to trial with any regularity. The drug stuff, you're in trial all the time. I think there's some violent crime that you're in district court, you go to trial all the time. But I put together a white collar case. It takes 2 years to investigate and grand jury indict and bring to litigation, and then probation is the offer from the court, and it gets wrapped up, and that's it. So it's hard to get into court, and I value, the experience that you gain as a courtroom attorney, and I kind of just needed to get back into it. So that's sort of long time as a prosecutor. The right firm shows up, I got to get back into court. That's probably the 3-part reason why I made the change. It's not easy though, because I love being a prosecutor.
Yeah. So what's been the most exciting part of that shift for you from being a prosecutor to private practice criminal defense?
It's that third thing. I'm getting back into court more, and it's, part of the job that's been hard has been that it does feel more like being back on the line, where you are in court on the fly. I won't want to talk about the exact hearing for propriety reasons. The case is still open, but I went in for an evidentiary hearing, and you had told me about it the day before, so I need you to cover this, which again, very much like a line attorney position. I got 12 hours notice, was actually kind of generous. But then I get into court, and I'm looking for the prosecutor, and they're like, oh, he's got 8 trials today. You're probably not going to see him until 11:30. Sure enough, at 11:30, the guy comes down and hands me the discovery for the hearing we have in 20 minutes. And I was like, great. So tearing through it, a lot of that on the fly litigation. And I think the hearing went really well. We got a great result for the client. And I feel good about how the hearing went. And that sort of reminded me of why I do this kind of work. Right? Is there things that I am better at than some trial attorneys, courtroom attorneys? There are things I'm worse at. But, you put me in court, and generally speaking, I'm able to make my way. And that was nice to remember that and get back in and really get back after it.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So now that you're on the defense side, do you find yourself thinking differently about cases compared to when you were on the prosecution side?
I don't know if I'm thinking differently about cases, but I am thinking differently about clients. I think as a prosecutor, I always try to remember that people are individuals. And it sounds corny, but like I think a lot of people, you have to at least tell yourself that you're trying to do that and then try to do it. Because if you're just like, this is a case, this is a stack of paper, and at the end of the day, this stack of paper is either going to jail or it's not, like that's a really hazardous way to conduct yourself and honestly, like there are parts of it that are so depersonalizing. It always struck me. Again, people who don't go into court wouldn't know this, but in Mass, in some of the courts, the prosecutor is in a table in front of the defendant, meaning like you would have to turn around to see the person that you're prosecuting. And in a lot of the courts in New Hampshire, you're side by side at counsel table. Unless I look over, I don't even see this individual. And I usually don't call them by their name. We call them the defendant. So even where you're trying to remember and keep at front of mind that you're dealing with a person whose life is going to be affected by how you do your job, it's different when you are on the defense side. You're talking to them on the phone, and they're like, I know how bad these charges look, but here are the extenuating circumstances. And you're like, yeah, that, at least in the cases I've had so far, I'm like, yeah, I can see why, it's unfortunate you got dragged into the criminal justice system over something like this. It's a much more human element when you have to deal with people directly. I care more about the case.
Yeah, I feel like that's one thing I feel like that's one thing prosecutors, sometimes I say to them, I wish you could sit down with my guy for like 10 minutes, like and just hear his story.
I refused that offer more times than I could count when I was a prosecutor. And I don't think it was because it was always a matter of, it felt like a propriety issue. But now that I'm on this side, I can see how it would matter.
Oh, yeah.
You could see someone like make a very compelling case for themselves. We're all human. People make mistakes. Sometimes they don't, and their allegations are shaky, and that's been a pretty big 180 whiplash for me, is seeing how people can get dragged into the system. I always knew probable cause was low, but I didn't think that it could be so badly manipulated. And so that's been kind of a shock to see it, to see it happen with that level of regularity, I guess.
Looking ahead, what are you excited about for your future role here at the firm?
I honestly, with how much I've enjoyed getting back into court more regularly, I would really like to try some cases. I'd like to get in and do some jury trials. A lot of time has passed since I was in front of a jury, and I've developed a lot as an attorney since then. So I think some of the stuff, like for example, I haven't had a jury trial since I started specializing in white collar work. So I think that my, everything I've learned about the complexity of those kinds of cases, I had to try one in front of a judge, and that's sort of a different environment.
Very different, yeah.
But I think I did have a white collar case in New Hampshire, and I didn't do as good a job as I would have liked to, because I didn't confront the complexity. And I kind of just threw everything at the jury and was like, good luck. Because I made sense of it in the 9 months I was investigating it. Like, here, you do it now in a day and a half. And that was not a great move. And I think that now I would know how to better package the information. Because, I've had to do that with grand juries. And obviously it's different in front of a petit jury. But, I think I've learned a lot. And I would like to get back in front of a jury and sort of, just experience what it's like to try and make the justice system work.
Oh yeah, definitely. Jury trials, that's the whole ball game. That's the most fun part about being a lawyer. If you could pick one type of case to work on every day for the rest of your career, what do you think it would be?
I think you know the answer to that.
Money laundering.
It is money laundering. Money laundering is such a fascinating thing to me. And for those, anybody who's not aware, or is thinking of the movie Office Space, where they were like Google, or they were looking up money laundering, couldn't Google back then, but they don't really know what it means or what it is, and that's fine. It's such a strange thing, and I'll be honest with you, a lot of lawyers in Massachusetts don't know what it is. I didn't really have a good sense for it before I went to the AG's office, and I indicted it a bunch of times, so I had to learn about it. It's a relatively new law in Massachusetts, especially given how old the Commonwealth is. And so, long and short, it's what people do when they have the proceeds of unlawful activity with that money? What do you do with the money?
You launder it, you clean it.
Right? So you can spend it. You got to clean it first. And what does it look like when you clean it? And it could be as simple as I moved it through a bunch of bank accounts. It could be I ran it through a legitimate business. It could be I went to a casino and changed the chips a bunch of times. And, whatever the answer is, don't be taking notes on this, by the way. These are all bad examples. Don't do these things, because I list those because I've caught people doing most of those things. So I think there's so much room left in how the case law needs to develop in Massachusetts that defending people from charges like that, I would have a lot of ground to try and push. It's one thing if you're just reciting cases that are identical to the case you've had. You're like, so last year the Supreme Judicial Court had this exact fact pattern and they said the following: I win, thank you, goodbye. But if it's like, we've never seen this before, no one has tried to do this before, the government's bringing this case, and I don't think that it works because I don't think the facts make sense here. The way the law is interpreting, the way the law should be interpreted, the way the law has to be interpreted for policy reasons. There's just so much ground. There's so much new ground to break, and I feel like, in addition to how engaging it is to try and track the complexity of a money laundering investigation and see where maybe the government screwed it up, maybe they missed a couple of things. There's a lot of challenge on the facts, and there's a lot of challenges on the law. And I think I'd really love to be able to sink my teeth into that kind of thing more.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah, Chris, it's been awesome having you on today. I mean, for those behind the scenes, I feel like we're true podcasters now because we recorded this whole thing and then we had technical issues. So now we're recording it again. You're not a true podcaster until you have to record the podcast again, I feel like.
And hey, we had a lot of technical issues before we started recording today. So we're doubling down.
So yeah, you've got such a diverse background, man, and I know that our clients are going to benefit from your experience, and really already have in the past couple of months that you've been here.
Yeah, I really hope that I can continue to contribute to the firm, and I can. I have enjoyed working with our clients. That's been a really refreshing piece of it. Was I didn't know how I was going to be once I changed sides. Was I going to be the kind of hard driving prosecutor? Everything is black and white, or is going to be able to work with people. And it has not been challenging. I find that I'm able to connect with people, and that's been a really bright side of the job.
Yeah, definitely. So that's all for today, folks. Thanks for tuning in to Boston Barristers, and keep an ear out for more fun episodes coming your way. We'll see you next time.